From the state capitol in Albany, Governor Mario M. Cuomo's annual message to the legislature, the State of the State Address.
All right. Pursuant to a resolution duly adopted in each of the houses of this legislature, the Senate and the Assembly of the State of New York are met in joint session for the purpose of receiving the annual message to the legislature from the Governor of the State of New York. It is indeed my pleasure to present to you at this time the Governor of our state, Governor Mario Cuomo.
That was not you, Chief. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. First of all, the members of this legislature, on being chosen, most of you, I guess, once again, to serve the people of this state, congratulations on the very high honor that you've won. And to Lieutenant Governor DelBello, my best wishes. And thank you for your act of faith in my continuing good health. And don't believe all those stories about friction between me and Warren Anderson. Warren calls me every day just to ask how I'm feeling. Today, ladies and gentlemen, we put aside the pageantry and the poetry of political campaigns and turn to the hard work and the prose of governing. And it's indeed a challenging business, as you well know. But from the very beginning of this nation's history, New York has always been the place where people came to fulfill their dreams, to go as far as their talents could carry them, decade after decade for 2 centuries. Our state has, with enviable regularity of success, welcomed people from all over the world and given them the chance that they were denied everywhere else, the chance to work and prosper and lift themselves up into security and comfort, even to great affluence. We did it with government that was practical, concerned, and creative. A government that produced a regular profusion of new ideas, policies, and programs, but all of them tied to a set of basic principles that has remained constant throughout our history and guides our government even today. And thus, we have always believed in only the government we need. We see the foundation of our governmental capacity to be a strong economy built on individual initiative, producing a private payroll that gives people a chance to earn their own bread with dignity. On the other hand, we've always sought balance and reasonableness in everything we do. And so we've always been able to provide all the government we need. Thus, we've always recognized that even at its very best, the free enterprise system is not able to provide for many who are too old or too feeble, and even for some who, though they're fit and willing, simply cannot find a job. And we've been wise enough, too, to know that some things government does not do well and should not do at all. We believe our greatest strength as a people is the freedom that allows us to believe and speak what we choose personally and privately, and that government's proper role is to guard and assure that liberty assiduously. We believe government should never be used to police people's souls. One other fundamental principle lies at the base of our success in this state. Our diversity as a state is so extensive as to be rivaled only by the nation itself. We have every color, every race, every religion, every lifestyle. Now, we believe that this diversity can be a great blessing rather than a burden. We succeed when we find ways to use the richness of that diversity instead of letting it divide and fragment us as it might. We succeed when we cooperate and work together, when we respect one another's needs and rights, when we act on the belief that the whole of this great state is more important than any of its parts. We call that mutuality, that synergism, family. And we succeed when the whole family thrives. Now, those are the principles that have led to our extraordinary success as a state and that have made New York the Empire State. But progress always doesn't come easily to us. We've had our very hard times. In 1975, we were at the brink of bankruptcy, and we recovered. In 1983, my first year as governor, we were threatened by the largest deficit in our history. It was a year of austerity and sacrifice. But we met that challenge together, doing the unpopular things that we knew were necessary. And a year ago, I called upon you to join in the work of securing our fiscal position and beginning the rebuilding of this state for the future. And under the leadership of Senator Anderson and Speaker Fink, Senator Ohrenstein and Assemblyman Rappleyea, you responded again, boldly and responsibly, and consider the results of our action. We're now creating thousands of jobs with the largest infrastructure rebuilding program in the United States. We've helped to stabilize property taxes with the state's largest program of local assistance ever implemented, the Medicaid pickup. We're making people safer with reforms in the corrections and criminal justice systems, with more resources for fighting crime. And we're profiting from the creative investments we made in education and economic development. And we've become the first state to attack the problem of acid rain, the first state to save lives with a seatbelt law, the first to offer new avenues to dignity for pregnant teenagers. And we've done all of these things. And at the same time, for 2 years in a row, we've balanced the budget without raising the broad-based taxes. Think about it. Population is up. Jobs are up. Major crime is down. New York stock is rising. But of course, there's much more to be done. Results, however, so far are heartening. Not just volumes of laws and neatly symmetrical columns in the state's fiscal accounts and improved credit ratings, but real, solid improvements in the lives of our people. Today, 7.6 million New Yorkers are at work, more than ever before in the state's history, 350,000 more than when I took office 2 years ago. We are all stronger today because a woman from the Hudson Valley who was on welfare last year now has a job as a medical assistant and can support herself and her children. And because a laid-off auto worker from Western New York got the chance to be retrained and to become a tool and die maker. And so each new opportunity we create means we have to spend less to undo the social turmoil and tragedy that can come from being out of work. The alcoholism, the domestic violence, the crime, the drug abuse, even the mental illness. Every job we generate on a private payroll in the state means that we have additional resources to help those who will never be able to support themselves. Those people so clouded in mind or broken in body for inscrutable reasons we'll never understand, that they will always depend on some measure of our help. Today, you and I, all of us, have the opportunity to spur the state's economy to greater heights. We can show more clearly than ever before that we are a society capable of both common sense and compassion, not just in the words of speeches delivered from lofty platforms, but in the day-to-day ordering of our affairs and the allocation of our resources. We can add a whole new chapter of progress to the success story that New York has already written. Now, the message on your desk this afternoon describes that vision. It offers progressive and pragmatic proposals for turning principles into programs, for translating new ideas into real instruments of hope. Hope to men and women who own small businesses, to young minority families who are struggling to save, invest, and grow. Hope to the leaders of industry, and hope, too, to an upstate farmer clinging to his family's land and concerned about his future, and hope to bright, young high school students whose chance to succeed in a world where pencils may become obsolete will depend very much on the ability of our schools to provide them with the technical tools of instruction that they need and teachers who can inspire them. Now, this afternoon, I can mention only a few of our proposals, giving you, I hope, a sense of the logical progression of the policies and programs and their consistency with the sound principles that I've mentioned today and have so often before. We'll work, for example, to further strengthen our economic base. I'll ask for a second passage of the resolution to double the investment capacity of our Job Development Authority, bringing it to $600 million. We'll have a new economic development corporation that will embody the partnership we seek between the public and private sectors and bring new resources to creating jobs in Western New York. The Industrial Cooperation Council will work with our old, troubled industries and develop new approaches to employee-employer relationships and new ideas with respect to the possibility of employee ownership. Our new Director of Economic Development, John Michelson, will bring his very broad private sector background to these efforts. We'll double the resources of the Office of Contract Compliance and Minority and Women-Owned Businesses, making it stronger and ensuring effective compliance with the goals for the participation of minorities and women in the state's multi-billion-dollar procurement and rebuilding programs. But you and I know that no new tools for expanding economic opportunity would be effective without a consideration of the way that we tax individuals and businesses in this state. We are a state with high taxes. There are reasons. We do things that other states do not. For the poor, yes, and proudly, but also for the great majority of New Yorkers who are not the poor. We believe that middle-income families, the people who work hard for their money and who pay for so much of the good that we do as a state, deserve their share of our public resources as well. And so we provide state mortgages to families trying to own homes. We support two of the largest public university systems in the nation, and we assist students in the private institutions at the same time. We maintain one of the world's most extensive and intricate networks of roads and bridges, subways, buses, and rail. But we know that in this fiercely competitive economic world, excessive taxation in the long run does not produce growth. In fact, it costs us revenue because it drives people and businesses out of the state. And for a decade, we've recognized the need to cut taxes. In 1977, Governor Carey and you, the legislature, began lowering income and other taxes, cutting them by more than $2 billion. Then a recession and hard times intervened, and we could not make further cuts. But now, because we did the difficult thing in 1983 and the wise thing in 1984, we can do the right thing together in 1985. Today, after 2 years of careful, responsible action by this legislature, led by Senator Anderson and Speaker Fink, we've reached the point where we can cut taxes. And we've done it the old-fashioned way. We earned it by keeping expenditures under reasonable control, by encouraging economic growth, by insisting on productivity programs, on finding new ways to do more with less. And so I'm pleased this session to be able to propose a new income tax reduction and reform program that will reduce the taxes of each and every taxpayer in the state of New York. It will call for a cut of $1.2 billion. My proposal will reduce the top income tax rate from 10% to 9% a clear signal to the business community of our commitment to economic growth. It will increase standard deductions and personal exemptions and revise the bracket structure to benefit all middle-income taxpayers. And it will also eliminate income taxes for those who work and are still below the poverty level, and make permanent the property tax circuit breaker designed to help needy elderly taxpayers. It will include an omnibus tax enforcement program to crack down on the tax cheaters and the bootleggers who force other taxpayers to bear the burden of their evasions of their responsibilities. And it will be part of an even wider program to simplify the way we tax, making it more equitable for everyone. Now, Speaker Fink's efforts in this connection are well advanced, and Senator Anderson's support for tax reduction is a matter of record. Now we need to work together to enact a tax cut that's fair and productive. I also believe with Comptroller Regan that as important as the tax cut is, it's not enough. There is an equal need for financial reform, for an even greater commitment to fiscal prudence, to living within our means. In the past 2 years, we've insisted on remembering the lessons that this state learned so painfully a decade ago. And because we did, the state's credit rating went up, and we saved millions in interest costs. But despite our progress, there are still faults in the way we spend and borrow. One of them will be removed this month. For the first time in this state's history, I will submit to you a budget balanced in accord with generally accepted accounting principles. That will bring a new integrity to the budget process. The state's accumulated deficit has left us with a burden of debt that we simply must erase, and it won't be easy. In the short run, it will cost us revenues, but it will, in the long run, allow us to cut taxes even further by ridding us of huge, unnecessary interest costs. And so first, I ask you, the legislature, to approve a constitutional amendment to require that every budget we adopt be balanced in accordance with the GAP system. And in the interim, I will ask you to approve a statute that would require that balance. Second, that we cap the annual spring borrowing. Third, that we begin the hard discipline of capping and reducing the deficit by making a first down payment of $300 million this year. A big payment, but I think it's worth it. And fourth, that we adopt a 15-year program to eliminate the $2.3 billion of the short-term borrowing that I believe is truly wasteful. Now, together with the tax cuts and the new economic partnerships promoted in the message, this fiscal reform will help us to give New York the most dynamic and innovative economy in the nation. But you know that our responsibility does not end with a balanced budget. It only begins there. Having made the pragmatic and common sense decisions that keep our economy strong, we can then do all the work that I think we agree government must do, or at least help to get done. Rebuilding the infrastructure, protecting our citizens, preserving the environment, seeing to it that every New Yorker, everyone, has a fair chance to secure a life of dignity. And the need for decent, affordable housing is one of the most glaring examples of things that government ought to be doing but hasn't done sufficiently well. That need touches almost every economic group in this state except the very wealthy. From young couples unable to afford a mortgage to the thousands of homeless people huddled in doorways all through this state, I will ask your approval of a $3.5 billion 5-year housing rebuilding program. It will include a trust fund that will make possible 20,000 housing units, a third of them for the homeless, a $1 billion increase in this state's affordable rental housing program, and a $1.25 billion increase in this state's affordable ownership housing program. By 1989, By 1989, this program could stimulate more than $6 billion in economic activity and create 30,000 construction jobs, reinforcing thereby the cycle of investment and private sector growth that is our real hope for the future. Now, the progress we're making in renewing the sources of our economic strength is important to every New Yorker. So is the fight to make our streets and homes and businesses secure from crime and violence. Thanks to you, much of the program we began 2 years ago to reform the criminal justice system is in place. Much, however, is still to be done. Although major crime came down more than 16% in 2.5 years, and although we now have almost 20,000 more people behind bars than we had 10 years ago, crime is still pervasive, still menacing. There's never justification for people to steal or to assault or to rape or to murder. Never. And when they do, they must know in this state that they will get caught, convicted, and punished swiftly and certainly. I think a new, clear, and tough, determinate sentencing system that I hope we can enact this session would help produce that result, or at least bring us closer to it. Since 1983, the state has done more than ever before to take criminals off the streets. We've already built 4,500 new prison cells to house the criminals who were convicted under the state's tough new laws. We'll build another 4,100 in the next 2 years alone. But this year I'll ask you to do 2 other things. One proposal is, I am convinced, a deterrent to the ultimate crime of murder. We all agree, of course, that murderers must be removed from society. With this proposal, I believe we can do it without putting the state into the business of killing. It is a law that is so severe It is a law that is so severe, so absolute, that I don't believe anyone can reasonably question its efficacy. It's life without parole, real life without parole. It's a penalty that criminals fear more than the death penalty. And we can have it this year if we're serious about a deterrent. The other proposal is one for making our roads and highways safer and for protecting the future of the young. Scores of people will continue to be killed and hundreds more maimed in car accidents because New York does not have a minimum purchase age of 21. We know, I think, beyond reasonable question, that this law actually saves lives. And every day brings new evidence that its positive impact goes well beyond highway safety, to health, to alcoholism, and other concerns as well. Now, both my support for 21 and my opposition to the recently threatened federal sanctions on 21 are clear. This change in the minimum purchase age, I believe, deserves your approval, not because of a threat by Washington, but because we need it. I will ask. 1985 can also be the year we achieve needed judicial reforms. Now, last week, as you all know, I was privileged to appoint 2 judges to the Court of Appeals. I'm proud of those appointments and pleased to have them in the chamber today, Judge Fritz Alexander and new Chief Judge Sal Wachtler. I'm proud of my other 2 appointments, too, Richard Simons and Judith Kay, who are also with us. And I'm proud of the ones I didn't appoint. I hope to announce with our new Chief Judge, Sal Wachtler, immediately after his confirmation, the formation of a joint committee on judicial administration to evaluate the court system and to recommend ways to make it more effective and to do it promptly. I will also continue to urge approval of legislation merging our trial courts into a single and coherent system. There's another form of lawlessness that may be less obvious, less dramatic than violent crime, but is just as lethal. Crimes against the environment make all of society a victim. They must be stopped now with the full force of this state's law, and so this session, I will ask that we enact the most comprehensive environmental legislation in the state's history. Some of it has long been advocated by our Attorney General, Robert Abrams. Parts of it have been passed by the Assembly. I'll propose an omnibus environmental crime bill that provides stiffer punishments for those who pollute and poison the environment, especially those who do so knowingly and whose actions result in physical harm to others. And I'll ask you once again to extend the statute of limitations for bringing suits against those responsible for causing injury from toxic exposure, and to give the Department of Environmental Conservation and we'll ask that you give the Department of Environmental Conservation broader powers and more resources to enforce vigorously the regulations and laws that we already have on the books. And finally, we need to rid our communities of the chemical dump sites that can be found all around this state. As you know, late in last year's legislative session, I proposed an $850 million Superfund to get the job done. Some of you said you needed more time to study it, and that's understandable. This year, we can make that Superfund law. 2 years ago, I described the goals of our program for New York with a phrase: jobs and justice. I believe that the work we've done so far and the work we begin today will continue to make these goals a reality for more and more New Yorkers. But it would be unintelligent and unfair to ignore those who, no matter how many opportunities we create or how secure we make our streets, will continue to depend on our compassion and our care. And nowhere is this more obvious than with the mentally ill. The commission that I established last year on the future of the state and local mental health system has now documented the inability of the current system to provide adequately the kind of consistent, dependable care to the mentally ill and communities across the state that they're entitled to and that we want to give them. And so I will ask you to join me in a long-term program to achieve the reform and redirection of the entire mental health system. My plan will shift the allocation of mental health resources toward the community and will authorize state operation of alternative residential programs. Now, we've already made some progress in caring for the mentally retarded and the developmentally disabled. This session, I'll seek funds both to continue the pace of community residence development and to improve the kind of care we provide within our own developmental centers. Now, the requirements of social justice, however, go far beyond these measures. There are in New York today nearly 1.4 million needy people. 1.4 million. Almost 90% of them women and children. 90% of 1.4 million people, women and children, who must look to state programs for some of their most basic needs, for some level of dignity and hope. For those families who must rely on public assistance, I will propose the equivalent of a 10% increase in the current basic grant through a home energy allowance supplement. And in addition, I will recommend increasing the supplemental nutrition assistance program. For families who are struggling to stand on their own, families in which a mother often cannot get a job without care for her children, my budget will include new initiatives to provide daycare services. Last year, we enacted legislation to help adolescents avoid pregnancy and to provide teenage parents opportunities for hope and independence. We call this important new initiative Avenues to Dignity, and this year, I'll ask you to expand it. And finally, as we prepare for the future, for scientific advances, for new ways to ensure dignity and justice and hope, I'll ask you to deal with some of the most anguishing problems of our time, the ultimate questions of life and death, from baby Jane Doe to when life ends. As you may know, I've established a task force on life and the law, and ask you that together we work to clarify the law as it bears on the very personal decisions that families have to make about life and death. Now, there is, of course, a great deal more to the state of the state than I can bring to your attention in the short time we have this afternoon. There are, in the message before you, exciting new programs in education, including special high schools of excellence and programs to attract and to keep the best teachers in the country, programs on affirmative action and women's equality and agriculture, and all of them, I believe, are important. I ask your most serious consideration of each of them. But in each part of the message, there is a single underlying intent, the intent to build new programs on the same principles that made New York the most dynamic society on this earth, a center of imagination and invention and innovation, and to use those new programs to build an exciting new era of progress for ourselves and for generations to come. We should be confident of all that we can achieve together. Even now, we should be confident in the opening moments of a technological transformation that is sweeping away old certainties, altering the way we think and live and communicate. We should remember that change for New York State has never been a threat. It's always been an opportunity. Look around you in this room. The future once happened here, in this building, in this very assembly chamber. Half a century ago, a generation of men and women defined the legislative agenda that eventually changed all of America, and through America helped change the world. That agenda became the basis of nearly 50 years of prosperity and opportunity. And this is now a whole new era and a whole new opportunity. We should be confident that we can give our people the modern education they need to work and the good jobs that they need to work at, the chance to own a decent apartment or a house, to have a family if they choose, to raise children, to enjoy God's nature, to grow together, the chance to dream and then to reach beyond those dreams. We know we can do it because we have done it before. And you and I are proof of that. We're the products of the generations before us who overcame want and prejudice and fear. People who began in anonymity and poverty, in slavery and in steerage, and won for themselves right here security and comfort and even fame. We start with far more than any of those before us ever had. And so we are challenged to reach heights never reached even by those giants who were our forebears, whose strength and success we so reverence. And we can meet those challenges together, you and I, if we choose to, if we forget differences that are superficial and remember the greater truth that we have in common, if we stretch our minds to find new ways to do things, new ways to use our enormous strengths, if we do what we know we can do, relying always on the principles that brought us here. What a marvelous prospect. How lucky we are to be given the opportunity to try. I look forward to sharing that opportunity with you. Thank you, and God bless you.
Governor Mario M. Cuomo's annual message to the legislature, the State of the State address, has come to you from Albany through the facilities of the New York Network, a service of the State University of New York.